A thin dreadlocks kid from Long Beach stepped into a recording studio in 1992 and changed the game forever. Snoop Dogg wasn't just a rapper, he was a walking contradiction. G-funk gangster, reggae lion, Sunday churchgoer, cannabis kingpin. Behind the smooth drawl and laid-back swagger lay battles with law enforcement, gang pressures, fame's demands, and a reinvention that still shocks tonight. We trace how Snoop became more than a West Coast voice. He became a worldwide phenomenon. Before the world knew the name Snoop Dogg, Long Beach knew him as Calvin Broadus, a quiet kid with an oversized imagination and a voice made for storytelling, born in 1971 to a single mother who worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. Snoop grew up in a neighborhood shaped by poverty, gang culture, and the booming crack epidemic of the 1980s. But his early life wasn't just street corners and sirens. Every Sunday, he sang in the church choir, learning melody, control, and that unmistakable vocal smoothness that later defined an entire generation of West Coast rap. His nickname, Snoopy, came long before the fame. His mother said he looked like the cartoon dog, skinny and wide-eyed, but that innocence wouldn't last. As a teen, Snoop found himself caught between two worlds, the gentle church boy with natural rhythm, and the kid pulled toward the rollin' 20 Crips, the dominant neighborhood set at the time. By 13, he was rapping at school talent shows. By 15, he was making mixtapes with friends. By 17, he was hustling to survive, and every police encounter, every night spent looking over his shoulder, sharpened the realism that later powered his lyrics. Yet even then, people around him said the same thing. Snoop carried a calmness unlike anyone else. Danger followed him, but fear never did. And that coolness, that unshakable laid-back presence, would become his greatest weapon, long before he ever set foot in a studio. What he didn't know was that his voice, his flow, and his story would soon travel far beyond Long Beach, straight into the hands of a producer who would change his life forever. In 1992, destiny arrived in the form of a cassette tape. Warren G., Snoop's close friend, played one of their early homemade tracks for Dr. Dre. Dre didn't just like it. He stopped, rewound it, listened again, realizing he'd stumbled upon a voice unlike anything in rap. Smooth but dangerous, melodic but gritty. A West Coast sound waiting to be crowned. Dre invited Snoop to audition, and the studio instantly felt the shift. Snoop wasn't just talented, he was effortless. The way he rode a beat felt like he was talking to it, not rapping on top of it. Within weeks, Dre brought him onto Deep Cover, and then The Chronic, where Snoop became the album's secret weapon. The whole country heard that voice and asked the same question: who is this Snoop Dogg? In 1993, Dre produced Snoop's debut album, Doggy Style, a cultural earthquake. It debuted at #1, the first debut rap album in history to do so. Gin and Juice, Who Am I?, Lodi Dodi, every track became a classic. Snoop wasn't just a rapper anymore, he was the sound of the West Coast. But success brought weight. Being the new face of gangster rap meant Snoop was living under a brighter spotlight, and in a darker world. The same neighborhoods he grew up in now watched him with envy or expectation. And Death Row Records, the empire he was helping build, was becoming more turbulent by the day. Still, Snoop kept rising, calm and collected, unaware that his biggest breakthrough would soon collide with the first life-changing controversy of his career. As Snoop's fame exploded, so did the microscope on his past. His known ties to the rollin' 20 Crips weren't just gang rumors. They were documented through years of police contact, interviews, and street history. And in the early 90s, when rap and gang culture were inseparable in the media's eyes, Snoop became an easy target. In 1993, everything escalated. Snoop and his bodyguard, McKinley Lee, were involved in the fatal shooting of a man named Philip Woldemariam. Prosecutors charged Snoop with murder. The rapper, who had just become the face of West Coast hip-hop, suddenly found himself fighting for his freedom. The trial stretched for years, with headlines branding him gangster, dangerous, and the most controversial man in rap. Snoop maintained he had no intent to kill anyone, that the shooting was self-defense. And in 1996, he was acquitted. The verdict saved his career, but it also changed him. Those close to him said he grew quieter, more reflective. Fame no longer felt invincible. It felt fragile, something that could disappear with one courtroom sentence. Meanwhile, Death Row Records spiraled into chaos. Tupac joined the label. Suge Knight tightened his control. Tensions with the East Coast escalated into a firestorm, and Snoop, caught between loyalty and survival, suddenly realized the world he helped build might be the same one that could destroy him. Behind the scenes, something darker was brewing, a turning point in Snoop's life that would send him on a path nobody expected and reveal a side of him the world had never seen. By 1995, Snoop Dogg wasn't just a rap superstar, he was one of the central faces of Death Row Records, a label that had become both a musical powerhouse and a ticking time bomb. Inside the studio, he was making classics. Outside the studio, he was surviving one of the most volatile eras in hip-hop history. With Suge Knight running the label like a military commander, and with gang affiliations surrounding almost everyone on the roster, Death Row wasn't just a workplace, it was a battlefield wrapped in luxury. When Tupac Shakur joined the label in 1995, the energy changed overnight. Pac brought intensity, paranoia, genius, and a momentum that electrified every room. He and Snoop clicked immediately. Two charismatic giants with different energies but a shared respect. Yet even as their friendship grew, Snoop could feel the atmosphere around Death Row tightening. Meetings weren't just meetings, they were confrontations. Studio sessions weren't just creative, they were charged with tension. Security guards hovered around every corner, not because of fans, but because of politics. The East Coast versus West Coast feud was reaching a boiling point. Tupac was escalating the conflict with fiery diss tracks. Suge encouraged it, and Snoop, caught in the middle, found himself trying to balance loyalty with survival. He didn't want war. He didn't want to turn New York into an enemy. But inside Death Row, neutrality wasn't an option. By this time, Snoop was still navigating his own legal battles from the murder trial. The pressure of possibly being locked away forever hung like a shadow over everything he did. He was dropping iconic verses while carrying the weight of a future that could disappear with a judge's gavel. Meanwhile, Death Row became darker. There were assaults, lawsuits, violent altercations. People whispered about internal betrayals. Money went missing. Enemies grew in silence. Snoop started noticing the looks people gave him. Long, calculating, wary. He started hearing rumors that certain people on the label didn't believe he was loyal enough to the West Coast, cause it was the first sign that his life wasn't just in danger from outsiders. It might be in danger from the very empire he helped build. The tension peaked after Tupac was killed in Las Vegas in September 1996. Snoop was devastated. Pac was like a brother. But grief wasn't the only emotion running through him. There was fear. Because Tupac had died during a feud Snoop never wanted to be part of. And inside Death Row, some believed Snoop's refusal to fully embrace the war made him suspicious. For the first time, Snoop began questioning everything: the label, the lifestyle, the path he was on. Death Row had made him famous, but now it felt like it might kill him too. After Tupac's death, Death Row became unrecognizable, a place filled with paranoia, accusations, and silent threats. Suge Knight was arrested shortly after the Vegas incident and sentenced to prison for parole violations, leaving the label leaderless and unstable. Without Suge's iron grip, the label began splintering. People started disappearing from the building. Albums were delayed. Guns showed up in the studio more than executives. Everyone whispered about someone being next. And in the middle of this collapse stood Snoop Dogg, one of the most famous names on the West Coast, but suddenly the most vulnerable. The breaking point came during an infamous car ride with Suge Knight shortly before Suge went to prison. Snoop later revealed the truth in interviews. He entered the vehicle believing his life might end that day. The feud between East and West Coast had spiraled out of control, and Snoop had publicly stated he wanted peace, especially with New York. When he went on Hot 97 and said he loved Puffy and Biggie, the streets exploded. Death Row took it as betrayal. Inside the car, Snoop sat quietly as Suge drove. The atmosphere was cold, heavy, charged. Snoop said it felt like time stood still, like every decision he'd ever made brought him to this moment. But instead of violence, Suge let him walk away unharmed. Still, the message was clear. If Snoop stayed with Death Row, he wouldn't survive. When Suge went to prison weeks later, Snoop knew he had to escape, not just physically, but musically, spiritually, emotionally. He realized he didn't want to die a gangster stereotype. He wanted longevity. He wanted fatherhood. He wanted a future. So So he started distancing himself from violence, from gang politics, from the environment he once embraced. He stopped glorifying certain aspects of his past. He changed his tone, his content, his outlook. But leaving Death Row wasn't simple. The label owned his recordings, his masters, and many believed Suga would never let him go. Behind the scenes, Snoop maneuvered with caution. He reached out to Master P of No Limit Records, one of the few moguls powerful enough to protect him. That decision would become the turning point of Snoop Dogg's entire life, the moment he transformed from death row soldier to global icon. When Snoop left Death Row for No Limit Records in 1998, it was more than a label change. It was survival. Master P didn't just sign Snoop, he sheltered him. He gave him security, protection, and something Snoop hadn't felt in years: safety. Under No Limit, Snoop reinvented himself. He shifted from the aggressive gang style of Doggy Style to a more playful, experimental, and refined version of himself. Albums like Da Game Is To Be Sold, Not To Be Told, and No Limit. Top Dog showed a rapper rebuilding his identity in real time. He removed himself from active gang politics, reduced violent themes, and leaned into his charisma, humor, and versatility, the traits that would one day make him the most recognizable voice in American pop culture. This was also the era when Snoop discovered the full strength of his public persona. He became busier than ever, acting, appearing on TV shows, working with Pharrell, launching business ventures. His once chaotic image transformed into something iconic and almost mythical. The cool, unshakable Snoop, who always seemed relaxed no matter what world he walked into. But the transformation wasn't superficial. Behind closed doors, Snoop was doing real work, rebuilding relationships, preventing gang violence in Long Beach, and dedicating himself to fatherhood. He created the Snoop Youth Football League to keep kids from falling into the same traps he escaped. He started mentoring young rappers. He distanced himself from the people and patterns that once threatened his life. Most importantly, he realized something no one expected from a former death row soldier. Snoop wasn't meant to be a gangster forever. He was meant to be a global figure. And that evolution, from Long Beach hustler to peaceful superstar, set the foundation for the next chapter of his life. A chapter that would bring him more fame, more success, and more reinvention than anyone in 1993 could have ever imagined. By the early 2000s, Snoop Dogg wasn't just back on top. He was evolving into something the hip-hop world had never seen before. The former death row enforcer, once associated with murder trials and gang wars, began transforming into a figure who could move between worlds with effortless charm. And the secret to his rise wasn't reinvention, it was expansion. Snoop realized that music was just the foundation. The empire he was about to build would travel far beyond rap. After leaving No Limit, Snoop found his true creative stride. He teamed up with Pharrell Williams and the Neptunes, creating some of the biggest hits of the decade. Beautiful, Drop It Like It's Hot, Let's Get Blown. These tracks didn't just chart, they reshaped Snoop's image. They showed him as a smooth, charismatic artist with humor, personality, and a mainstream appeal untouched by controversy. Pharrell once said that Snoop's voice was an instrument, and the world agreed. But what made Snoop unstoppable was his ability to flow between cultures without losing authenticity. He appeared in movies like Starsky and Hutch, took roles in comedy shows, started hosting award ceremonies, and became a household name even among people who didn't listen to rap. Kids loved him. Parents found him funny. Grandparents recognized him from TV. Snoop had become universal. Meanwhile, the cannabis culture he had always embraced became part of his brand. What began as a stereotype transformed into a billion-dollar lane. Snoop became the unofficial ambassador of weed long before legalization swept across America. His chill demeanor, once associated with gangsta rap, now became a symbol of relaxation, humor, and carefree wisdom. Marijuana wasn't a liability for him anymore. It was a marketing weapon. But Snoop's rise wasn't without tension. Many from the Old West Coast era questioned whether he'd softened. Some accused him of abandoning the authenticity that made him famous. Yet Snoop understood the truth. Staying stuck in one version of himself would kill his longevity. Reinvention wasn't betrayal, it was survival. Behind the charm, the jokes, the smooth voice, something deeper was happening. Snoop was proving that an artist associated with violence, legal battles, and a deadly rap feud could evolve into a cultural icon that transcended genre, generation, and geography. And as his fame grew, something inside him began shifting too. A desire for spiritual clarity, a break from the energy of his past, and a transformation that would shock even his biggest fans. He was about to become something no one expected, a lion. Lion. By 2012, after 2 decades of fame, Snoop Dogg reached a crossroads. He'd accomplished everything a rapper could dream of: hit albums, global tours, TV deals, award shows, business ventures. But inside, he felt disconnected from the person he once was. During a trip to Jamaica to record music, he was invited to a Rastafarian temple, a sacred place where elders guided him through a deep spiritual ritual. The priests told him something that would change his life forever. "You are not a dog, you are a lion." According to traditional Rasta belief, a spiritual rebirth can reveal an individual's true identity. They said Snoop was entering a higher phase of consciousness, rising above the violence and chaos of his past, and he believed them. He embraced the name Snoop Lion, stepping into a new era, not as a gangster, not as a rapper, but as a man seeking peace. The transformation was dramatic. He released the reggae album Reincarnated and the documentary of the same name, showcasing his journey through spiritual healing, reflection, and forgiveness. For the first time in his life, Snoop openly confronted the pain and trauma he had bottled up, the friends he'd lost, the violence he'd witnessed, the trials that nearly ended him, and the guilt he carried for surviving. This wasn't a gimmick, it was a resetting of his soul. Snoop quit certain street habits, stopped glorifying gang affiliations, and dedicated himself to family, coaching youth football, running community programs, and building businesses. His long-standing connection to spirituality, hinted in his early church days, resurfaced in a way that balanced both his past and his evolution. But transformation never comes without backlash. The hip-hop world was divided. Some mocked Snoop Lion as a midlife experiment. Others saw it as a betrayal of the gangster image they idolized, yet Snoop didn't flinch. He understood what they didn't. Reinvention is how legends stay alive. And as he emerged from his spiritual rebirth, something remarkable happened. The world embraced him even more. Snoop Lion didn't replace Snoop Dogg, it expanded him. It added new depth, new layers, a new chapter in a career no one could predict. But the biggest evolution was still ahead. The moment Snoop Dogg became more than an entertainer, more than a rapper, more than a cultural figure. He became a global brand. Today, Snoop Dogg stands as something almost beyond category. Part rapper, part comedian, part entrepreneur, part cultural ambassador. There is no other artist whose influence stretches across music, TV, film, advertising, sports, cannabis culture, gaming, crypto, entrepreneurship, and family entertainment all at once. Snoop built a media empire. The Emmy-winning show with Martha Stewart, his own cookbook and kitchen products, Coach Snoop showcasing his youth football league, his commentary with Kevin Hart, voiceovers for major companies, partnerships with the biggest cannabis brands in the world, Death Row Records, which he now owns, Snoopadelic Films, his presence in countless video games, his Super Bowl halftime performance, global commercials that made him instantly recognizable even outside hip-hop. But behind the empire lies something deeper, the journey of a man who survived worlds that weren't designed for survival. He escaped the streets without abandoning where he came from. He rebuilt himself after death row. He turned trauma into transformation. He replaced feuds with peace. He embraced fatherhood. He stayed relevant across 4 generations of rap without ever losing his identity. Snoop is still the same kid from Long Beach in many ways. Laid back, smiling, wisecracking, but his wisdom carries the weight of experience few have survived. He is a living testimony that evolution is not weakness, that peace can be more powerful than violence, and that reinvention is the secret to longevity. His voice is timeless, instantly recognizable, etched into the DNA of pop culture. He went from gang-affiliated rapper facing murder charges to global royalty who can sit next to Martha Stewart one day and perform with Dr. Dre the next. And that is the paradox that makes Snoop Dogg one of the greatest to ever touch a mic. He didn't just survive the game. He outgrew it. He outlived it. He transcended it. Snoop Dogg's story is a blueprint for transformation, a masterclass in reinvention, and a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous rapper alive becomes the most beloved icon on Earth.